I'm opening my Bible to Ecclesiastes 7. Ecclesiastes chapter 7. As you maybe have observed, we've got some new technology. We've got a video camera, and Larry's working the controls back there. We're going to start recording Bible classes and sermons and posting them on our new website and our YouTube page. So be patient with us. We're learning as we go, and so hopefully the quality of the content won't improve, but maybe the quality of the video and the recording will improve as we go. But it's all new camera, new laptop, new software, and so it's all new. So, but we'll be testing those things out as we go. In fact, Larry's recording tonight, so we'll get a good test. But anyway, Ecclesiastes chapter 7. Before we get into this section, any questions, comments about what we've covered thus far in the book of Ecclesiastes? Couple questions, pop quiz for you. Remind me, what does the word Ecclesiastes mean? Preacher. Yeah, it's actually a Greek word that means preacher. The Hebrew word was koheleth, but it's been translated into the Greek. It's Ecclesiastes. Why they didn't go ahead and translate it into English and call it the book of the preacher, I'm not sure. Who do we believe is the author? Solomon. All right, here's the tough question, if you can remember. Why do we think it's Solomon? What evidence is there that Solomon is the author?
Because of all the things that he tried.
Yeah.
We knew he had all the wisdom to do all these things, so we don't know of anybody else at this time that could do this.
Yeah, he speaks of the wisdom, him pursuing wisdom, the wealth. That is this classical Solomon, certainly. He references himself as being king in Jerusalem, not just king, but king in Jerusalem. He's a son of David, and so yeah, all of those things lead us, I think, to the unavoidable conclusion that it is Solomon. Probably won't surprise you. I think maybe we talked about this in the introduction. A lot of scholars dispute that, but the scholars just do that. They just want to argue. It's something that seems so obvious. So. All right, so chapter 7 kind of begins a new section, but it is springboarded off of a statement. So I want to back up one verse into chapter 6 because it kind of sets the stage. After talking about wealth and poverty having its problems and illustrating the futility of life, he says this in chapter 6, verse 12, "For who knows what is good for man in life? All the days of his vain life, which he passes like a shadow. And who can tell a man what will happen after him under the sun? Who knows what is good for man in life?" I think that question is answered in chapter 7. Or maybe a better way of saying that statement sets the stage for what goes into chapter 7. Because in chapter 7, he's going to talk about some things that are good in life, but they're not the things that you might assume that are good, and certainly not the things that the world would see. And so he's going to set out here in the first part of chapter 7 some contrast. This is better than that throughout this list. And two observations I want us to see about this list of, well, let's go through the list of contrasts and then come back to that. He says in verse 1 of chapter 7, a good name is better than precious ointment. So here's something that's better than the other. Precious ointment, we would think of expensive perfume. Good name is better than expensive perfume. The day of one's death than the day of one's birth. There's a little bit of an ellipsis there. The day of one's death is better than the days of one's birth. Verse 2, it's better to go to the house of mourning than to the house of feasting. Verse 3, sorrow is better than laughter. Verse 4, the heart of the wise is, verse 5, it's better to hear the rebuke of the wise than for a man to hear the song of fools. And so there's our list of contrasts. This is better than that. Two observations I think are key in understanding this section. Number one is, as I've already said, almost every one of these is going to be counterintuitive. It's not going to be what you would normally think. Well, the greatest example of that, the day of one's death is better than the day of one's birth. And you're like, what? We celebrate a birth, we mourn a death. How can it's going to be that counterintuitive, not what you would normally think, and certainly not what the world would think and the culture would think. So almost every one of these is a head scratcher, and you have to go, well, what do you mean by that? How is that better than that? The second observation that we need to keep in mind as we go through this is that this set of contrasts are not good versus evil. It's not like one's good and one's bad. It's just one is good and one's better. So he says the day of one's death is better than the day of one's birth. He's not saying birth is bad and that's an evil choice. Always choose death, never choose birth. That's not the point. I don't think any of these, I may change my tune there, but my memory serves me. I don't think any of these he's saying one is evil and the other is good. Just that there's a greater benefit to one than the other. We might illustrate, prove that point. Skip ahead to verse 14. In the day of prosperity, be joyful, but in the day of adversity, consider. And so throughout this first part of this list, he's going to contrast really prosperity to adversity. And say that really, in some sense, adversity is better. But he says in verse 14, they're both good. In the days of prosperity, rejoice, but in the day of adversity, consider. And his point's going to be that for a lasting purpose, considering is better than being joyful and rejoicing. So, all right. So now that we've kind of set the stage, let's go back to verse 1 and look at this list of contrasts. His first one is, a good name is better than precious ointment. Again, to modernize that, we would say it's better than expensive perfume. Now, there's dispute as to what that first one is. That first one just a part of the list, or is it kind of the premise? In fact, we can almost translate it. If that's the case, we could translate it as a good name is better than precious ointment. So the day. And so some scholars believe that first statement was just a colloquialism that was known. So just as that's the case, these other things are true. So whether that's the case or not is in some sense immaterial, but he may just be beginning here is again, it's kind of, here's the premise. A good name is better than precious ointment. Our character, our integrity is better than, and so if this is the starting premise, it seems to me he's talking about inside's better than outside. Your good name is kind of your character, something that's inside you. That's better than perfume that you could spray on you that's just external. So internal better than external. Max?
In modern times, big cities, nobody knows anybody, why a good name doesn't amount to much anymore. But out in the country, where a lot of people have known families for generations and generations, it's still a thing, that, well, I remember back, my grandpa told me that their grandpa stole a horse.
Oh, yeah.
You better watch out dealing with them, So
Yeah.
back in this time, a good name was probably about as good as you could do.
Yeah. That reputation of who your character was, and that your word was as good as a bond there, certainly. So, and we start right off with maybe the most difficult of the contrast, the day of death than the day of one's birth. Now, he's going to go on to say in verse 2 that it's better to go to the house of mourning than the house of feasting. I take that to be like going to someone else's funeral. But verse 1 seems to be talking about your own funeral. that the day of death, the day of your death is better than the day of your birth. Again, that's counterintuitive, isn't it? We're like, wait, what do you mean by that? And so all of these cause us to pause and ponder and think about. And so help me, in what sense can that be true, that the day of your death is better than the day of your birth? Max? Yeah, for the child of God, certainly. That the day of birth, you are starting a life in this miserable existence of pain and suffering and sin and all that. The day of your death, if you're in a right relationship with God, you're being freed from all of that. So that's certainly a way in which it's better. Nick?
And the other part of that is if you're not right with God, one that's left, someone, a loved one has passed, and you're not right with God, you got that reminder that one day my day is going to come too.
Yeah,
And I better
it's
get right about
yeah, it's educational. It teaches us something. Yeah. Any other senses that you can think that death is better than birth? I think those are certainly true and maybe the main points of that, but there's other maybe more almost philosophical ways that you can look at it, that your death is you've accomplished something. That's the ending of a life. And again, are we correct in making the assumption, as Max did, that here's someone who, when they die, they're going to heaven, someone in the right relationship, someone who has that good name that, as it started out with, that you can look back and others can look back upon that life and say what all they've done. And we do that oftentimes at funerals, don't we? We go back and we talk about the good and the things that were accomplished in their life. The day of birth, there's nothing like that to celebrate. We celebrate potential of what this child might grow up to be, but that baby hadn't done anything. We hadn't accomplished anything. And it's almost, the little joke, the inside joke that we use sometimes, especially if your mother is still alive, that on your birthday, we always got that backwards. On my birthday, they celebrate me. Really, I didn't have anything to do with that. They were celebrating my mom. She's the one that, is responsible for this and had to go through the pain and suffering to get me here and to get me to this point. And so, again, that baby born, we celebrate the joy, the potential of that, but that baby hadn't done anything. But the day of one's death, we can go through and look what all they did and has been accomplished there. And so there's multiple ways where certainly that can be the case. All right, now we turn it. It is better, verse 2, to go to the house of mourning than to the house of feasting. For that is the end of all men, and the living will take it to heart. Some would argue, and I don't see a major objection to this, that based upon the earlier contrast, that this mourning obviously is talking about a funeral. The day of feasting may be talking about a birthday party, uh, but probably generalize it to any kind of party. And so one, again, is better than the other. Again, we emphasize he's not saying feasting is bad. And don't be happy. Don't go to a birthday party. Don't have a good time with your friends and laugh and do those things. No, he's not saying one's evil and one's good. He's just saying one is preferable to the other. And again, this is not the way we would normally think of it. If I ask you, Friday, would you rather go to a funeral or go to a birthday party? I think we universally probably say I'd go to the birthday party. Me, because there's going to be cake there. But we always normally going to think that. But we can, once we think about it, we can see. Nick's already talked about that there's that lesson. Every funeral anticipates our own. That's one day that's going to be me, and am I ready for that? And so there's certainly some benefit. What are some other reasons or why he could say it's better? One is better than the other.
it. I'm reminded of kind of the difference between Christmas and Easter. Everybody loves to celebrate Christmas. It's the birth of Jesus is celebrated. all the potential of what he may do. Easter is, it's everything he did do.
Yeah.
And then now we have to measure up to that. And mourning that he's dead, but prison. But mourning that he's gone, but now there's something attached.
Yeah. That's good. That's good. Yeah, in some sense, if we were going to rank those, Easter should be above Christmas because that celebrates what he accomplished. One of his last sayings, "It is finished." He did something. Yeah.
Eat a lot more than Christmas. Somebody's house, not even Easter.
Yeah, yeah, that too. Larry?
Reminder of our own mortality we get when we go to someone else's funeral kind of reinforces the whole, you can't take it with you, that life is going to be over. All this stuff that we've done is vanity, and it kind of reinforces the thesis of the whole book in a way. That,
Yeah.
Because we get so wrapped up in our day-to-day routine and trying to get ahead and everything else, and then you go to like, it's all going to be over.
Yeah.
This is a paper plane.
And yeah, any funeral can do that. A funeral of a faithful child of God, we can look at that and think, I want the hope that that person had. But here's someone who, not that we're the judge, but we have no hope for, and you can go to that funeral, there's still benefit there. I don't want to be that guy that the preacher has to either struggle or lie to say something good. You heard the old joke about the funeral and the casket's laying here and the preacher's just praising this man about a wonderful guy, and the widow elbows her son and says, "Go up there and see if that's your dad." In that, it's like, and so either a good funeral, if you know what I mean by that, or a bad funeral. There's lessons learned for our own, whether for here or for eternity. Adam?
Not just for yourself, but for so if you go to the house of feasting, oh, okay, so here's somebody else, there's a whole group of people already, okay, there's more food I've laid out for you over there, I'll do your dishes when you leave, easier thing for people to do, but to go to the house in the morning, well, that's a more difficult psychological thing for you to undertake, and it's a lonelier, more somber occasion, and
Mm-hmm.
it's a more personable thing to go to somebody who's mourning and express your care and give them a casserole or whatever that it is to go, oh, okay, yeah, the cake and ice cream's over there, yeah, okay, yeah, thanks.
Yeah, it's just this empty. Yeah, and that's part of the contrast we need to see throughout this. Again, not saying that one's evil and one's good. Not saying a birthday party's evil, funerals are good. He's just saying that to a philosophical sense, mental sense, the funeral is better because you learn something. You go to a birthday party and you eat that cake and you have fun and people are telling jokes and laughing and and you had a good time. Again, nothing bad about that. But when you get home, you think, you know, what did I learn? How did that make me a better person? Again, not that it was bad, but did that make me a better person? Did that increase my character? Did that make me better fit for the kingdom of God? But I can say that about a funeral, as every comment's already been made, that I can learn something. I actually benefited from. And I think that's going to be true generally for adversity versus prosperity all across the board, isn't it? You learn more in the bad times than you do in the good times. Now, we don't like it being that way, but that's the reality, that you build more character, you learn more lessons, a greater dependency on God. We see that, you take about two historical things in our country when people were drawn closer to God: the Great Depression, when monetary things were taken away, that built character. And it formed that generation that went through that Great Depression. It indelibly put a stamp on them, and formed their character. We think about 9/11, of after that, of how sadly we can see now that it didn't last, but how that brought the country together and it united us, and we thought about different. And so, generally speaking, adversity is better character building than prosperity. Bad times build character. Good times, they're just good times. You didn't learn anything. I didn't get any better from that. Sorrow is better than laughter. For by a sad countenance the heart is made better. So again, there's the point. And again, I sound like a broken record here. He's not saying don't laugh, don't smile, that's bad for you. No, he's just saying that laughter is good, fun, but it didn't build any character. Sorrow builds the character. Adam?
All of these things were something we had time for in chapter 3 so far.
Yeah.
We had a time to be born, a time to die, a time to weep, a time to laugh. We had a time to mourn, a time to dance. And we have all of these are already given these pairs in chapter 3, and now he's telling us which is better and why in chapter 7.
Yeah. And again, if we hadn't read chapter 7, or we're thinking spiritually, we'd probably say, I wish there wasn't a time to weep. I wish it was all laughter. I wish there wasn't a time for the bad. And Solomon is saying, no, that's you can't eliminate those. And actually, those are where you're made better. The heart of the wise, verse 4, is in the heart of the mourning, or the house of mourning. But the heart of fools is in the house of mirth. Again, you're not learning anything by going to that party and laughing. Do it, but realize you're not learning anything. You're learning something in the house of mourning. Verse 5, it's better to hear the rebuke of the wise than for a man to hear the song of fools. So that song of fools is probably in that house of mirth. And again, I may be wrong here, but I don't take the fools in verse 4 or 5 to be necessarily what we might call a sinful fool. You know, sometimes the Bible contrasts the wise man seeks God, the fool doesn't believe in God. I don't know that he's saying that. I think he's just saying that the way we might say, you know, driving home from that birthday party, we all laughed and had a good time. We just like, boy, that was fun. A bunch of foolishness, but we had fun. And I think that's the sense in which he means fool here. Not sinful fool, but just that was just foolishness. You know, it was just we played some silly game. You know, we played charades or something. We might soften and say that was just silly. It was just silly. And so it's better to hear the rebuke of the wise than for a man to hear the song of fools. And again, counterintuitive. Who raises their hand and said, would you rather hear a silly song, or do you want somebody to pull you aside and say, you need to do better? Let me tell you where you're wrong. Now, nobody signs up for that. But again, which is more beneficial? The singing the silly song and laughing and, you know, having a good time, you didn't benefit. But if a wise person pulls you aside and says, can I give you some advice and kind of help you out some here, where maybe I think you're doing something wrong, hey, that's not fun. That's adversity. But you were made better in that. You weren't made better by the silly song. Again, not that it's evil, but there was just no lasting benefit to that. 4, here's the song. And some have even said that the contrast here is the song of fools is kind of the idea of a fool praising you. You'd rather hear a wise man rebuke you than a fool praising you. And whether that's the case or not, I'm not sure. Verse 6, for like the crackling of thorns under a pot, so is the laughter of the fool. So this also is vanity. And again, I don't take the fool here to in its extreme sense of an absolute idiot or of an absolute sinful person. I think it's just the idea of just a fool with just a silly laugh. And so he says that laugh is like the crackling of thorns under a pot. What do you think that means?
A fire.
Yeah, it's that fire. And we've all, if you've done that campfire or something, you put that certain things in there. And I can remember as a kid, I don't remember what it was, but we would intentionally go get certain things that would snap and pop and put them in the fire. We build this fire and we go get that because it's going to do that popping. and snap. There was a certain type of wood that we could get, or branches that we could get, that was really just going to do that. And so the point is, oh, Kyle.
Well, I just want to make a point. I don't know if this is right or not, but I think it says the thorns under the pot. Sounded to me like the thorns weren't good for anything to be put in the pot, but for burning, all it's good for is, heat the pot up to get with it, but that's not all it's good for.
Yeah, yeah. And that crackling of the thorns, or the sound of the thorns, some translations say, that's just a short burst of empty noise. It didn't add anything to the fire. The fire was from the things burning. That popping, that didn't do. It's just a noise. It didn't do anything. And so that's the way laughter is. Again, broken record. He's not saying laughter's bad. He's just saying, what did you get out of that? It was just a pop sound. You need to also incorporate into your life the lessons you can learn from adversity, something that's really beneficial. The fire, what was beneficial, not the popping noises. Glenn?
You burn thorns, that's what it does. It crackles and pops and sparks.
Yeah. And that's all it does. It's not generating a whole lot of heat. It's just generating a whole lot of noise. And we probably all know people like that, don't we? that they just generate a whole lot of noise. They're not generating a whole lot of heat or work or energy. It's just all noise. So, Nick?
The thought I get from all of those is, there's hard times or sad times, wherever, you learn from those. You enjoy the silly times for what they are, but you're not going to have all of one or the other.
Yeah.
Some people only want fun all the time. That's what he wants. What am I going to do this week? Oh, whatever I can find fun to do. That can't be all your life is. It's kind of like, we were talking before, the rich man. Life's empty because he got all the money and he doesn't put in a hard day's work. He doesn't have that to look back on. Your life is just full of just trying to find fun and pleasure. It's going to be empty. There's not going to be any wisdom in it or seriousness about life.
Yeah. You were never made better. You were never made wiser in that. So, yeah. So he's saying you see that adversity, not wish it upon yourself. Don't go through the obituaries and just go to strangers' funerals because, hey, it's better to go to. No, but when you do go to that funeral, see the benefit of it and gain it from it. Verse 7 troubles me, not by necessarily understanding what it means. It just seems like it's thrown in there a little bit, but maybe you can help me. Surely oppression destroys a wise man's reason, and a bribe debases the heart. That proverb, if you will, makes sense, but I'm not sure how it fits with this. Other than maybe it goes back to the very first contrast: a good name is better than precious ointment. If all of this is about building that good name, that good character, that good integrity, see adversity as a way to build your character and integrity, and now guard it, because oppression, or some translations say extortion, will make you mad, and a bribe will debases the heart. So maintain that good name, maintain that good character. Don't get caught up in extortion and bribery, things that were very rampant in that day. The end of a thing. Oh, I'm sorry, Adam.
I think looking at this, look at some of the super billionaires that we've got around now. That, look, now we're going to use all this money to start a foundation to help starving children in Hungary or whatever. But you're trying to make a living working for me. Oh no, minimum wage. No, you want extra time off because your wife had a baby? Too bad.
Yeah.
You're in tomorrow or you're fired. So we're going to take all this money to our foundation and have a charity, and we can't help you out. Wait, if you're helping the people in wherever, can't you help me? No.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's that idea of certainly it destroys a wise man's reason. So yeah. So are those hungry people, or are they hungry people? I don't know if that pun was intentional. I like it. The end of a thing is better than its beginning. So here's that contrast. And kind of a broader application to the death is better than birth. The end of the thing is better than the beginning. And the patient in spirit is better than the proud in spirit. The end of a thing is better because, again, something's been accomplished, something's been done. The beginning, nothing's really been done. Do not hasten in your spirit, verse 9, to be angry, for anger rests in the bosom of fools. Maybe this ties back into verse 7, the idea of the oppression and the bribery and our exasperation with the system's unfair and all of that. Don't hasten in your spirit to be angry. Number one, because you're not going to change it. Your anger is not going to change how unfair and how evil the world is. That anger rests in the bosom. That anger isn't going to make you better. You can learn from adversity, but if adversity just makes you angry, you miss the lesson. You're not going to learn anything by being angry because of adversity. But you can learn something with a proper attitude through adversity. I love verse 10 because it's something we need to all take to heart. Do not say, why were the former days better than these? For you do not inquire wisely concerning this. Why is that unwise to say the good old days were better than they are now? Yeah. Again, you didn't change anything. All you did was make the present bad days seem worse by comparison. And so it didn't change anything. You're not going to change that. So yeah, it's just exasperating you. Maybe also because maybe they weren't. You know, sometimes nostalgia. Let me tell you a story, true story about two of my uncles. I can remember, this is my mom's side of the family. We always have these family reunions, and my uncles would be standing outside visiting and talking. And I can remember overhearing two of my mom's brothers talk. And they were started complaining about like everything. Every old man complains about how expensive stuff are. And one uncle said, man, you remember those good old days when Cokes were a nickel? Wasn't that great? And my other uncle said, you're an idiot. He said, what do you mean? He said, yeah, I remember when Cokes were a nickel. He said, but we didn't have a nickel. And he said, at this time, inflation's taken over. He says, at that point, he says, Cokes are $1 a bottle. He said, I can go to Sam's and fill my truck full of Coke now. And so his point was pretty true that sometimes the good old days really weren't that good. Yeah, Cokes were just a nickel, but I've heard my dad and uncles talk about that didn't mean they went and bought a bunch of Cokes. They bought fewer then. Now they're $1 and $2, and we go to Sam's and buy a case of them. And so maybe part of it is that nostalgia. They really weren't always good, but even if they were better, as Abby said, it doesn't change. That doesn't make today better. Ed, and then
in the old days, gas was 18 cents a gallon. What is it now?
yeah, almost 3. Yeah. But again, by comparison, most of us who were alive back then, it was harder to buy a gallon of gas than it is now at that $3. So, Nick.
Kind of along those lines of family reunion or something like this, something about it. The good old days when I was a kid. And I said, wait a minute. I remember getting up in the morning before I could get out of bed, I could see my breath. That didn't seem like the good old days to me.
Yeah.
But in the other part here is where he says those days were better than these. If I'm saying that, what am I doing to make these days good?
Yeah.
I'm trying to let myself off the hook for it.
Yeah, you're just griping and complaining. You're not actually doing anything. So yeah, I said, I just love that saying because it is, if nothing else, is like Abby said, it's just a source of frustration. You're just making today even worse because, yeah, maybe it's not as good, but that doesn't make it better. Just you're griping and complaining. Whatever one is, he has been named already, for it is known that he is man. I don't think this is a fatalism. I also don't think it's kind of determinism, Calvinism, the idea that everything's been set. You know, the day of your death has already been set, and God knows pathed out your life perfectly. I think it's just simply saying that you can't escape your limitations. Uh, you are limited by life. You're limited by your circumstances. You're limited. I mean, not to be the pessimist, but we're limited by so much. We're limited by your genetics. You know, if you were born with a silver spoon in your mouth, did that give you an advantage as if you were born on the poor side of town? Sure, it did. If you live on the poor side of town, you were given limitations based upon, you know, your IQ. That generally that doesn't change. You can get more education, but if you were born dumb, then you're just limited by that. You're not going to change that. Nothing's going to change that. If you're like me, you're born poor and dumb until you're really limited. But that's just the way it is. That you cannot contend with him who is mightier than he. You can't contend with God and the circumstances that have made you what you are. Since there are many things that increase vanity, how is man the better? For who knows? Or excuse me, I backed way up there, didn't I? Wisdom is good, verse 11, with an inheritance, and profitable to those who see the sun. So, as opposed to the foolishness of what he's talked about before, anger, resting, the empty crackling of the pot, the foolishness of anger, wisdom is good with an inheritance and profitable to those who see the sun. For wisdom is a defense as money is a defense. Wisdom is a protection, some translations say, or a shelter, as money is a shelter. And so money can protect you from uh, the sun because you can build a house. It can protect you from thieves because you can hire guards or put a fence up. So wisdom is that defense, that protection, or that shelter. But the excellence of knowledge is that wisdom gives life to those who have it. The excellence of knowledge is that wisdom gives life to those who have it. And you know that you see probably what's coming here, the old trite saying of the difference between knowledge and wisdom. Knowledge is knowing the facts, wisdom is knowing how to apply the facts. I love, and you probably heard this one before, the difference between knowledge and wisdom. Knowledge is knowing that tomato is a fruit. Wisdom is not putting it in a fruit salad. And so there's that difference between wisdom. Knowledge is, I know something, but wisdom is the idea of being able to actually use it for some benefit and for some purpose. All right, that kind of puts us to an end of a paragraph and pretty close to the end of our time. So let's just draw a line there and pick up at verse 13 next time.